At my father's funeral, my own daughter looked me straight in the eye and said, "Grandpa died because you didn't care enough." In that moment, my chest tightened, and I believed her. For 3 years, I lived in shame, thinking my father had gone to his grave, disappointed in me. But on my 58th birthday, I received a special gift, a yellow envelope from my father's old attorney. And inside was something they never expected, a secret that would give me back everything and make them beg when it was already too late. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story speaks to you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Quick note: this narrative includes fictionalized elements created for reflection and learning, though the lessons I'm sharing may resonate deeply with your own experiences. They say the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes the truth arrives on your 58th birthday in a yellow envelope sealed with your dead father's initials, and it shatters everything you thought you knew about your family. The morning of February 15th, 2022 started like any other morning in my 400-square-foot apartment in downtown Riverside. Weak winter sunlight filtered through the single window overlooking the parking lot. I was already in my firefighter's uniform, the navy blue fabric worn soft from 31 years of wear. Station 14 expected me in an hour. I grabbed my keys when someone knocked on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. In the 3 years since my father died, visitors had become rare. Most days it was just me, the coffee maker, and the sound of traffic grinding past below. I opened the door to find an old man in the hallway, maybe mid-60s, wearing a suit that had seen better days. His face was pale, drawn tight with something that looked like guilt or fear or both. In his trembling hands he held a yellow envelope. "Gerald Sinclair." His voice cracked on my name. "Yeah, that's me. I'm Samuel Porter. I was your father's attorney, Clifford's attorney. He left something for you. I was instructed to deliver it personally, and only you, on your 58th birthday." The envelope hung between us like an accusation. My father had been dead for 3 years. Why would his lawyer show up now on this specific day with an envelope I'd never heard about? Samuel's hands shook harder. He looked like a man who'd been carrying a weight too heavy for too long. "Your father also told me to tell you something." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said, "I was never disappointed in you. I was proud of you every single day." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I couldn't breathe. Proud of me. Every single day. But that wasn't what my daughter had told me at the funeral. Samuel pressed the envelope into my hands before I could find my voice. "When you're ready, call me. I'll stand with you, Gerald. I owe your father that much." He handed me a business card, then disappeared down the stairwell before I could ask what he meant. I stood there holding the envelope and card, and for a second, I considered running after him, but something stopped me. Maybe I wasn't ready for the answers yet. I closed the door and leaned against it, staring at the envelope. It was heavier than it looked, the paper thick and slightly yellowed. On the front, in my father's slanted handwriting, "To Gerald. Open on your 58th birthday." Beneath that, a red wax seal stamped with the initials C.S. Clifford Sinclair. My father had sealed this envelope himself probably years ago, and Samuel Porter had kept it hidden all this time. My mind flashed back 3 years to the gray April morning when we buried my father. I remembered standing beside the casket at St. Mary's Church, my daughter Ashley beside me in a black dress and heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd been calm that day, professional. She was a junior partner at one of the top law firms in Riverside, unlike her old man in his ill-fitting thrift store suit. After the service, Ashley pulled me aside. Her face was carefully neutral, her voice low and measured. "Dad, we need to talk about Grandpa's will." I remembered the hollow feeling in my stomach, the sense that something was about to go wrong. Grandpa's will is complicated, she'd said, not quite meeting my eyes. He left you $50,000 for a reliable car, he said. The rest of the estate is split between Marcus and me, with 5% going to charity. I'd stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. 50,000 out of a $3.5 million estate. Wide-eyed asked. Ashley had looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight. He said he was disappointed, Dad. He thought you could have been more, that you settled for being a firefighter when you had so much potential. Those words had carved themselves into my chest and stayed there for 3 years. Disappointed. Settled. I'd believed her, because why wouldn't I? She was my daughter. She was a lawyer, and I was just a guy who put out fires and barely scraped by. But now, standing in my apartment with this envelope, Samuel Porter's words echoed in my head. I was never disappointed in you. I was proud of you every single day. I walked to the couch and sat down. My fingers found the edge of the wax seal. It broke easily, the red wax flaking onto my lap. Inside the envelope were 5 things: a USB drive, small and black, a leather journal, the cover worn smooth with age, a brass key with a tag, attached Heritage Trust Bank Box, 1958, a Polaroid photograph, faded and creased. I picked it up and felt something crack open in my chest. It was me and my father, taken in 1985. I was 7 years old, sitting on his lap at the kitchen table, both of us bent over a chessboard. His arm was wrapped around my shoulders, and we were both smiling. The 5th item was a handwritten letter on cream-colored paper, folded once. I didn't open it yet. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too hard. I set everything on the coffee table and just stared. A USB drive, a journal, a key, a photo, a letter. 5 ordinary objects that somehow felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I didn't know what any of it meant yet. But somewhere deep in my gut, I knew that whatever was on that USB drive, whatever was written in that journal, was going to change everything. And I was right. What I didn't know was that inside that envelope was proof of the biggest betrayal of my life. I didn't know that my daughter Ashley had lied to me at my father's funeral. I didn't know that she'd stolen $3.3 million from me and spent 3 years living off my inheritance while I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. I didn't know any of that yet, but I was about to find out. 3 years before that February morning, on a gray April day in 2019, I stood in St. Mary's Church and watched them lower my father into the ground. The casket sat at the front, during the service, polished oak gleaming under the stained glass light. But in my mind, I was already burying him, already saying goodbye. The church was half empty. Maybe 40 people showed up. My father had lived a quiet life, the kind where you know your neighbors and help when needed, but you don't make a big splash. He'd outlived most of his friends. The people who came were mostly firefighters from Station 14, guys I worked with, who'd met Clifford at the occasional barbecue. They came for me more than for him. I stood in the front pew wearing the only suit I owned, a black one I'd bought at a thrift store 10 years earlier. The jacket pulled tight across my shoulders now. I'd put on weight since then, the kind that comes from too many vending machine dinners between shifts. Next to me stood Ashley. 28 years old, my daughter, dressed in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and heels sharp enough to kill. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her makeup perfect. On her other side was Marcus, 19, my son, in a designer suit I knew I hadn't paid for. He spent most of the service looking at his phone. My father had raised me to believe that wealth wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the lives you touched, the people you pulled from burning buildings. I became a firefighter because of him. Because he taught me that showing up mattered more than climbing ladders or chasing paychecks. He was proud of me for that. At least I'd always thought so. The service was short. Father Mike said kind words about a man he'd known for 40 years. Dan Cooper, My lieutenant told a story about the time my father showed up at a 4th of July picnic with a truckload of fireworks. People laughed. It felt good to hear them laugh. Then it was over. People filed past to offer condolences. Most shook my hand, said something about what a good man Clifford had been, and left. Dan clapped me on the shoulder. He was a good man, Gerald. He loved you. I was left standing there with Ashley and Marcus, who had moved off to the side and were whispering to each other in low, urgent tones. I watched them, wondering what could possibly be so important. Ashley glanced up, caught my eye, and walked over. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of look she wore in courtrooms when she was about to deliver bad news. "Dad," she said quietly. "We need to talk. About Grandpa's will." I blinked at her. "Can it wait, Ashley? No." Her voice was firm, not unkind, but final. "It can't." She took my arm and steered me away from the remaining guests toward a corner near the confessional booths. Marcus followed, still silent, still looking uncomfortable. Ashley lowered her voice. "Dad, I need you to understand something. Grandpa, in his final months, he was very clear about his wishes. He was hurt. Disappointed. The word hit me like a fist. Disappointed in what? In you." I stared at her. She didn't look away. Her gaze was steady, almost clinical. "He told me," she continued, her voice smooth and rehearsed, "that you were so busy with your shifts, your 24-hour rotations, that you barely visited him. He felt abandoned, Dad. He spent the last 2 years of his life practically alone. He had to hire a caregiver because his own son couldn't find time for him." The words carved into me, each one a fresh wound. "Ashley, I visited every week. I called him. It wasn't enough." She let that sit between us. I felt something cold settle in my chest, heavy and suffocating. "Why, he said you could have been more." Ashley went on, quieter now, almost gentle. "He said you had potential, but you chose to stay a firefighter. You chose to scrape by on $54,000 a year while he built a $3.5 million estate. He wanted you to be proud of yourself, Dad. But instead, you settled. The word echoed in my skull. I'd always wondered if my father thought that. If he looked at me with my worn boots and my second-hand truck and my cramped apartment and felt disappointed. But I'd never asked. I'd been too afraid of the answer. "His will reflects that," Ashley said, pulling a folder from her purse. "I'm sorry, Dad, but he left you $50,000. For a reliable car," he said. "The rest is divided between Marcus and me. We each get about $1.5 million, and 5% goes to charity." She handed me a document. I stared at the words on the page, but they didn't make sense. 50,000 out of 3.5 million. "What?" The word came out broken. "Because he thought you'd settled, Dad. He thought you could have done more with your life." I signed the papers that day. Right there in the church with my father's casket still sitting 20 feet away. I didn't ask questions. I didn't demand to see proof or talk to a lawyer. Ashley was a lawyer. She worked at one of the top firms in Riverside. She was my daughter. Why would she lie to me? Marcus shifted beside her, looking uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded when Ashley told him to sign as a witness. When it was done, Ashley folded the papers back into her folder and gave me a small, sad smile. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, Dad, but Grandpa wanted to be honest even in death. I left that church believing my father died ashamed of me. I left believing I wasn't enough. And for 3 years, I carried that weight every single day. But that morning on my 58th birthday, when I broke the seal on that yellow envelope, everything I thought I knew shattered into pieces. And the truth buried for 3 years under my daughter's lies finally began to surface. I sat on my couch for a long time after Samuel left, staring at the 5 things spread across my coffee table. The USB drive, the leather journal, the brass key, the Polaroid. The letter. They sat there like evidence in a case I didn't understand yet, waiting for me to piece together what they meant. My shift at the station started in 40 minutes. I should have been walking out the door, but I couldn't move. My father's handwriting on that envelope, the wax seal with his initials, Samuel's shaking hands, it all felt too big to ignore. I picked up the USB drive first. Small, black, unremarkable. The kind you could buy at any drugstore. I turned it over in my palm, feeling the weight of it, and wondered what my father's voice would sound like after 3 years of silence. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter, half buried under unopened mail and a week's worth of coffee mugs. I cleared a space, powered it up, and plugged the drive in. The screen flickered. A single audio file appeared labeled simply, "For Gerald." I clicked it. For a second, there was nothing. Just the hiss of empty recording, the kind that comes from old equipment or a quiet room. Then his voice filled my apartment, and I forgot how to breathe. Gerald, my son. I closed my eyes. It was him. Not a memory, not an echo. Him. If you're hearing this, it means I'm gone. And it means Samuel finally kept his promise to deliver this to you on your 58th birthday. There was a pause. I heard him take a breath, slow and deliberate, like he was choosing his words carefully. I need you to know something, Gerald. You were never a disappointment to me. Never. From the day you were born, you were my pride. Every life you saved as a firefighter, every time you put on that uniform, I was proud. So damn proud. My throat closed. Tears blurred my vision hot and fast, and I didn't try to stop them. But I also need you to know this. Ashley lied to you. Marcus lied to you. And I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry I didn't stop it before I passed. The air left my lungs. I gripped the edge of the counter knuckles white and forced myself to keep listening. The will Ashley showed you at my funeral. His voice hardened. It's fake, Gerald. She created it. She took the real will, the one I signed in March of 2019, with Samuel as my witness, and she destroyed it. Then she forged a new one and filed it with the probate court. I felt something crack open inside me, something raw and bleeding. Here's what really happened. In my actual will, dated March 18, 2019, I left you 95% of my estate. That's $3.325 million, Gerald. The countryside house, the trust fund, everything. I left Ashley and Marcus nothing, because in my final 2 years, they abandoned me. His voice turned cold, bitter in a way I'd never heard before. They didn't visit. They didn't call. They hired a caregiver and forgot I existed. You were the only one who came every week. The only one who called me every night after your shifts, even when you were exhausted. You were the only one who loved me. I was crying now, silently, my chest heaving with sobs I couldn't control. Ashley took that money, Gerald. She stole your inheritance. She made you believe I was ashamed of you when the opposite was true. And she's been living off $3.3 million for 3 years, while you struggled to pay rent in that tiny apartment. There was another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost gentle. I've left you everything you need to prove it. The journal, the key to my safe deposit box, the letter. Samuel knows the whole story. He'll help you if you let him. Don't let her win, son. Fight for what's yours. Fight for the truth. The recording crackled. I heard him shift, maybe lean closer to the microphone. I love you, Gerald. I always did. I'm sorry I didn't say it enough when I had the chance. Then silence. The file ended. The hiss of empty air returned, and then nothing. Just me alone in my apartment with tears running down my face and a fury building in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. I sat there for a long time, staring at the laptop screen. The cursor blinked. The file name sat there mocking me. For Gerald. 3 years. 3 years I'd believed I was a failure. That my father had died disappointed in me. That I wasn't good enough. And all of it, every sleepless night, every moment of shame, Every time I looked at my reflection and felt like I'd let him down, it was a lie. Ashley had done that. My own daughter. She'd looked me in the eye at his funeral, handed me forged documents, and let me believe I was nothing. I reached for the Polaroid photo with shaking hands. It was old, the colors faded to a washed-out yellow. 1985. I was 7 years old, sitting on my father's lap at the kitchen table. We were bent over a chessboard, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, both of us smiling. I remembered that day. He'd taught me how knights moved, how to think 3 steps ahead. He'd told me chess was about patience, about seeing the whole board, instead of just the next move. I turned the photo over. On the back in his handwriting, Gerald and me, best day. The tears came harder. I pressed the photo to my chest and let myself break. For 3 years, I'd carried the weight of his disappointment. But he was never disappointed. He was proud. He'd always been proud. And Ashley, my daughter, the person I'd trusted most after he died, had stolen that from me. She'd stolen the money, the house, the inheritance. But worse than that, she'd stolen 3 years of peace. 3 years I could have spent remembering my father with love instead of shame. I set the photo down carefully, like it might shatter. Then I picked up the leather journal. It was worn, the cover soft and cracked with age. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Whatever was inside, I knew it wasn't going to be easy to read. I opened it to the first page. My father's handwriting filled the lines, neat and deliberate. March 12, 2017. Ashley visited today. She asked about my estate planning. Again, I flipped ahead. Page after page of entries spanning 2 years. March 2017 to March 2019. Every page a record of my father's final years. Every page a record of how Ashley and Marcus had treated him. And as I started to read, I felt what was left of my heartbreak all over again. The sun had climbed higher by the time I opened the journal, light slanting through my apartment window and pooling on the coffee table. My hands shook as I turned to the first page. The leather cover was soft, worn smooth by years of handling, and my father's handwriting filled every line in neat, deliberate strokes. March 12, 2017. The first entry. Ashley visited today. She asked about my estate planning. Again. This is the 3rd time this month. She's worried about the 2016 will, says it's outdated. I told her I'm considering changes. She didn't like that. I stared at the words. March 2017. 2 years before he died. That was when it started. When Ashley began circling like a vulture waiting. I flipped ahead. September 8, 2017. I fell in the kitchen today. Called Ashley. She said she was too busy with a case. Called Marcus. No answer. Finally called Gerald. He came within 20 minutes, took me to the hospital. Sprained wrist. Gerald stayed with me all night, even though he had a shift the next morning. I remembered that night. My father had tried to send me home, insisted he was fine, but I couldn't leave him alone in that hospital room with its flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. I'd slept in the chair beside his bed, my neck stiff the next morning, but I'd been there. January 15th, 2018. Ashley and Marcus came over today. First time in 4 months. They brought Marcus's new girlfriend. Spent the whole time taking photos of the house, asking about the property value. They didn't ask how I was doing. Not once. My chest tightened. 4 months. They'd gone 4 months without visiting, and when they finally showed up, it wasn't for him. It was for the house. I turned the page and the next entry hit me like a blow. June 22nd, 2018. My medications were moved again. I can't find my heart pills. Ashley was here yesterday going through my office. I asked her about it. She said I probably misplaced them, but I know I didn't. I'm starting to wonder. The sentence ended there. starting to wonder. I read it 3 times, each time feeling something cold settle deeper into my bones. My father had a heart condition. He needed those pills, and Ashley had been in his office alone going through his things. I didn't want to think about what that meant. Couldn't let myself go there. But the implication hung in the air like smoke. November 3rd, 2018. Gerald called tonight, asked if I needed anything. I lied and said I was fine. The reality is, I haven't seen Ashley or Marcus in weeks. I hired Rosa, a caregiver. Gerald doesn't know. I don't want him to feel guilty. He's already stretched so thin. Rosa. I'd never heard of her until Samuel mentioned witnesses. My father had been so alone that he'd hired a stranger to keep him company, and he'd hidden it from me because he didn't want me to worry. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and kept reading. The final entry was dated March 5th, 2019, just 9 days before he died. I signed the new will today with Samuel. 95% to Gerald, 0% to Ashley and Marcus, 5% to charity. Samuel asked if I was sure. I am. Gerald is the only one who loved me, the only one who showed up. His handwriting grew shakier in the next paragraph, the letters slanting. I told Samuel to keep the will safe, to hide it. I don't trust Ashley anymore. If something happens to me, Gerald must know the truth. I'm leaving him everything. A yellow envelope, a key, a letter, everything. Then, at the bottom of the page, written in large capital letters that took up 3 lines, Gerald, you were never a disappointment. You were my son, and I loved you. I closed the journal and set it down carefully like it might break. My face was wet. My chest hurt. But underneath the grief, something else was building. Something sharp and hot and unforgiving. Anger. My father had died alone. Not because I'd abandoned him, but because Ashley and Marcus had. They'd left him to hire a caregiver to sit in that house by himself, waiting for phone calls that never came and visits that stopped. And then when he was gone, they'd lied. They'd stood beside me at his funeral and told me he was disappointed in me when the opposite was true. They'd made me carry that shame for 3 years, made me believe I'd failed him. I picked up the small brass key that had been in the envelope. A tag dangled from it, the ink faded but still legible, Heritage Trust Bank. Box 1958. 1958, the year my father was born. I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight. This wasn't just about a journal or a recording or even a letter. This was about proof. Legal, concrete, undeniable proof. Whatever was in that safe deposit box, my father had made sure it would stand up in court. He'd planned for this. All of it. The envelope delivered on my 58th birthday. The recording where he explained everything. The journal documenting Ashley and Marcus's neglect. And now the key pointing me toward the final piece of evidence. I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me. The clock on the wall read 11:30. My shift at the station had started 2 hours ago. Dan would be wondering where I was, but for the first time in 10 years, I didn't care. I walked to the phone and dialed the station. Station 14. It was Jake, one of the younger guys. "Now, Jake, it's Gerald. I need to take a sick day." There was a pause. "You okay, man? You never call in sick." "I'm fine. Just need the day. Tell Dan I'll explain later." I hung up before he could ask more questions. The next morning, I would go to Heritage Trust Bank. I would open box 1958. And I would find out exactly what my father had left for me to prove that Ashley had stolen everything. The next morning, just after 9, I stood outside Heritage Trust Bank in downtown Riverside. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place that made you feel small just walking past it. I'd driven by it 1,000 times on my way to the station, but never had a reason to go inside. People like me didn't have safe deposit boxes. We had checking accounts that ran dry by the end of the month, but my father had a box here. Number 1958. The year he was born. The brass key sat heavy in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out and walked through the revolving doors. Inside, the bank was quiet. Marble floors, high ceilings, a row of tellers behind polished counters. I approached the nearest one, a woman maybe in her 50s with sharp eyes and a nameplate that read, Helen Morrison. Good morning, she said, her smile polite but distant. How can I help you? I need to access a safe deposit box, number 1958. I slid the key across the counter, along with a folded copy of my father's death certificate creased from being carried in my wallet for 3 years. Helen took both her expressions softening as she scanned the certificate. I'm sorry for your loss. She typed something into her computer, then looked up. Box 1958 was registered to Clifford Sinclair. You're Gerald Sinclair. His son. Yes. The box was set to transfer automatically to you upon his passing. She frowned slightly. I'm surprised no one contacted you sooner. No one contacted me because Ashley made sure of it. She'd convinced me I wasn't entitled to anything except $50,000 and a lecture about my failures. Helen stood. Follow me, Mr. Sinclair. She led me through a set of heavy doors into a back corridor. At the end was the vault, a reinforced steel door with a wheel lock like something out of a heist movie. She spun the wheel, pulled the door open, and gestured me inside. The vault was smaller than I expected. Rows of metal boxes lined the walls, each one labeled with a number. Helen found 1958 near the bottom, unlocked it with a key from her ring, and slid the long metal box free. She carried it to a private room off the vault, a windowless space with a single table and chair. Take your time, she said. I'll be outside if you need anything. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat down and stared at the box. My hands shook as I inserted the brass key and turned it. The latch popped open with a soft click. Inside was everything my father had promised. A sealed envelope sat on top, labeled in his handwriting, Last Will and Testament of Clifford James Sinclair, March 18th, 2019. Beneath it, a stack of notarized documents stamped with official seals. Signatures from Marie Williams, Notary Public. Witness statements from Rosa Martinez and Father Michael O'Connor. Everything legal, everything documented. There were bank statements too, printed on thick paper with the Heritage Trust logo at the top. I scanned the first page. Trust fund balance as of March 2019, $2.5 million. A property deed for the Countryside House, 847 Mountain View Road. Appraised value $800,000. An appraisal document for my father's vintage watch, $25,000. And at the bottom, a second sealed envelope addressed to Samuel Porter. Instructions in my father's handwriting: if I die, suddenly deliver the yellow envelope to Gerald on his 58th birthday. Do not tell Ashley or Marcus. I set everything aside and opened the will. The first line hit me like a fist. I, Clifford James Sinclair, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils, including the will dated October 2016. I kept reading. To my son, Gerald Michael Sinclair, I leave 95% of my estate totaling approximately $3,325,000. This includes the trust fund, the countryside property, and all personal effects, including my vintage watch. To charity specifically, the Firefighters' Widows Fund, I leave 5% of my estate totaling $175,000. To Ashley Marie Sinclair and Marcus James Sinclair, I leave nothing. This decision reflects their actions during my final years. They abandoned me when I needed them most. Gerald was the only one who showed love and care. I read it twice, then a third time. $3,325,000, everything. And Ashley had stolen it. My hands shook as I set the will down and reached for the bank statements. The first transaction jumped out at me. April 25th, 2019. Transfer to Ashley Sinclair, $2,500,000. 11 days after my father died. 11 days and she'd moved the entire trust fund into her name. I flipped through the pages. More transactions followed, a trail of withdrawals spanning 3 years. June 2019 to December 2021. $1,175,000. Lifestyle expenses, penthouse down payment, vacations, designer clothes. She'd burned through over $1 million while I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. January 2022, transfer to Marcus Sinclair, $500,000. Hush money. She'd paid him $500,000 to keep quiet. Current balance, $825,000 remaining. I sat back in the chair, staring at the numbers. My father had left me $3.3 million. Ashley had taken it all. Spent half of it, given Marcus $500,000 to stay silent, and made me believe I was worthless. I pulled out my phone and photographed every page: the will, the notarized documents, the bank statements, the property deed, all of it. Evidence that couldn't be denied. When I was done, I carefully placed everything back in the box, locked it, and walked out of the vault. Helen looked up as I emerged. "Did you find everything you needed?" "I did." I walked out of the bank into the cold February morning, my phone heavy in my pocket, with photos of every document. I had the will. I had the bank records. I had notarized proof that my father had left me 95% of his estate, and Ashley had forged a new one. But I couldn't do this alone. Without Samuel Porter's testimony, Ashley could claim the documents were fake. She was a lawyer. She'd know how to twist the narrative. I needed Samuel to stand with me. That afternoon, I called him. That afternoon, I sat across from Samuel Porter in his cramped office on the edge of Riverside. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. Peeling wallpaper, a desk with water stains, filing cabinets that didn't quite close. This wasn't the office of a successful attorney. This was the office of a man barely scraping by. Samuel looked older than he had that morning at my door. His face was drawn shadows under his eyes, like he hadn't slept in days, maybe years. "Oh, you opened the box," he said quietly. "I did." He nodded, staring down at his hands. They were shaking. "I need to tell you something, Gerald." His voice cracked. "And I need you to understand that I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it." I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "Go on." Samuel poured himself a glass of water from a pitcher on his desk. It took him 3 tries to get the water in the glass without spilling. 3 years ago, he began on April 18th, 2019, 4 days after your father passed. Ashley came to my office. I felt my jaw tighten. She was calm, professional. She knew exactly what she wanted. He paused, swallowing hard. "She offered me $500,000 to bury your father's real will. The 2019 will that left you 95% of his estate." The room went very still. "And you took it?" I said, my voice flat. "I took it." I stood up, pacing to the window. My fists clenched at my sides. "You let my daughter steal $3.3 million from me because you needed the money." "Yes." I turned to face him. "And you waited 3 years to tell me." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "My wife Linda, she was sick. Stage 4 cancer. We didn't have insurance. The medical bills were destroying us. Ashley knew that. She researched me before she walked into this office." His voice broke completely. "Linda died 6 months later, and I've lived with the guilt every single day since. I wanted to hit him, wanted to grab him by the collar and shake him until he understood what he'd taken from me. 3 years. 3 years of shame, of believing my father died, disappointed in me, of working myself into the ground while Ashley lived off stolen money. But I didn't move. I just stood there breathing hard, trying to keep myself from doing something I'd regret. Clifford gave me that yellow envelope a week before he died. Samuel continued his words, coming faster now, like a confession he'd been holding too long. He told me, "If something happens to me, Samuel, give this to Gerald on his 58th birthday. Not a day sooner. He'll need time to grieve first." He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. But I was a coward. I kept that envelope in my safe for 3 years. I told myself I'd deliver it someday. It wasn't until January of this year that I finally pulled it out and remembered what Clifford had asked me to do. "Why now?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. Samuel stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a thick folder. He set it on the desk between us, because Linda's last words to me were, "Samuel, don't die a coward." And I've been dying a coward for 3 years. He pushed the folder toward me. "I kept copies of everything, Gerald. The real 2019 will, the notary records, witness statements from Rosa Martinez and Father O'Connor, even recordings of my meetings with Clifford where he explicitly stated his wishes." I stared at the folder. "I'll testify," Samuel said. "In court, in front of a judge, in front of anyone you need. I'll tell them what Ashley did, what I did. I'll surrender my law license if that's what it takes." "Why should I trust you?" I asked. "You already sold me out once. You shouldn't trust me." His voice was steady, now resigned. "But I can prove everything I'm telling you, and I can stand in front of a courtroom and tell them exactly how Ashley Sinclair committed fraud." I picked up the folder, flipping through the pages. Copies of the will, notarized documents, witness statements, all of it organized, labeled, ready for court. "Well, you kept all of this," I said slowly, "for 3 years. "I knew it was wrong," Samuel whispered. "I knew what I'd done, and I couldn't bring myself to destroy the evidence. Maybe part of me always hoped I'd find the courage to do the right thing." I closed the folder and looked at him. This broken, guilt-ridden man who'd enabled my daughter's betrayal. Part of me wanted to walk out, leave him to rot in his guilt. But I needed him. Without his testimony, Ashley could claim the documents were fake, that I was lying, that I'd fabricated everything out of desperation. "I'm not going to forgive you, Samuel," I said quietly. "Not now, maybe not ever. I understand. But I'll let you help me. Because my father trusted you once. And if standing with me is how you earn back even a sliver of that trust, then do it." Samuel nodded, wiping his eyes. "What do you need me to do?" I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Be ready to testify in 2 weeks, because I'm going to expose Ashley in front of everyone she's ever lied to." His eyes widened. "2 weeks, Gerald. You need to be careful. Ashley's a lawyer. She'll fight back." "Let her fight," I said. "I have the will. I have the bank records. And now I have you. She can't twist her way out of this." Samuel took a shaky breath. "Where are you going to do it?" I don't know yet." I stood, tucking the folder under my arm. "But when I figure it out, you'll be the first to know." I walked to the door, then paused, looking back at him. "Samuel, if you back out, if you disappear or change your story, I will come after you with everything I have. Do you understand?" "I understand," he said quietly. "I won't run. Not this time." I nodded and left the folder heavy under my arm, the weight of 3 years finally beginning to lift. But I couldn't do this alone. I needed a plan. A way to confront Ashley that she couldn't squirm out of, couldn't deny, couldn't spin into another lie. I needed someone I trusted more than anyone. Someone who'd known me for 30 years and wouldn't let me do something stupid. I needed Dan. The next evening I found Dan in the break room at Station 14. Most of the crew had turned in for the night. The station was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional crackle of the radio in the apparatus bay. Dan sat at the table with a cup of coffee gone cold. I dropped the folder in front of him. The will, the bank statements, my father's journal. Read it, I said. He looked up at me, then down at the folder. It took him 20 minutes to go through everything. When he finished the last page, he set it down carefully, his face red. Son of a... He caught himself. Gerald, your own daughter did this. She did. And Marcus knew. He took $500,000 to keep quiet. Dan stood up, pacing across the small room, running his hands through his graying hair. 3 years. She let you believe your father was ashamed of you for 3 years, while she spent your inheritance on what designer clothes, a penthouse, and her fiancé's engagement ring, I said. That's the real kicker. She's getting engaged. Dan stopped walking. What? I pulled the cream-colored invitation from my jacket pocket and slid it across the table. You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Ashley Marie Sinclair and Philip Michael Crane. Saturday, March 5th, 2022 at the Grand Riverside Hotel. Black tie. 300 guests. Dan read it twice, his expression shifting from shock to something darker. She invited you to her engagement party after stealing $3.3 million from you. She has no idea I know, I said. As far as she's concerned, I'm still the broke firefighter who thinks his father died disappointed in him. Dan sat back down, his eyes narrowing. You're going to confront her there, at the party. Now in front of 300 people, including her law firm partners, her fiancé's family, and every high society contact she's cultivated with my father's money. A slow grin spread across Dan's face. You magnificent, vengeful bastard. I need your help, Dan. I need to make sure this is airtight. She's a lawyer. She'll try to twist everything, claim the documents are fake, claim I'm lying. So we bring Samuel, Dan said. Samuel's testifying, but I need more. I need the notary Marie Williams. I need Father O'Connor and Rosa Martinez to confirm they witnessed the will, and I need you there to back me up in case she tries anything. Dan pulled out a notepad. All right. Step 1, you attend the party. Blend in. Let her enjoy her moment. Step 2, I wait until the speeches. Every engagement party has speeches. Step 3, you take the microphone. You present the evidence. And Samuel steps forward to corroborate everything. Dan nodded, then paused. What about Marcus? Marcus made his choice, I said quietly. If he wants to defend Ashley, he can try. But I have bank records showing he took $500,000 in hush money. He won't want to talk. Dan leaned forward, his voice softening. Gerald, man, are you ready for this? Once you do it, there's no going back. Ashley's your daughter. This will destroy her. It'll destroy any chance of reconciliation. I thought about that. About the 3 years of shame I'd carried. About the nights I'd lain awake wondering why my father hadn't thought I was good enough. About Ashley standing beside me at the funeral lying to my face. She made me believe I failed my father, Dan, I said. She made me carry that shame for 3 years. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because the truth matters. Dan studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then I'm with you, all the way. We shook hands. Dan stood to leave, then stopped at the door. Gerald, one more thing. If this goes sideways, if she tries to retaliate legally, or otherwise, you call me. Day or night. Understood. Understood. After he left, I sat alone in the break room, staring at the invitation. March 5th. 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to gather every witness, every document, every piece of evidence. 2 weeks to prepare for the moment when Ashley's perfect engagement party became the stage where her lies unraveled in front of everyone she'd ever tried to impress. 2 weeks felt like forever, but I wasn't going to waste a single day. I looked down at the folder again at my father's handwriting on the journal pages, at the bank statements showing every dollar Ashley had stolen. This wasn't just about money. It was about honor, about making sure my father's final wishes were respected. about proving that integrity mattered more than wealth or status. Dan was right to ask if I was ready, because once I stood up in that ballroom and exposed Ashley, there would be no taking it back. No second chances. No father-daughter reconciliation over coffee someday when the dust settled. But the truth was, there was nothing left to reconcile. Ashley had burned that bridge the day she looked me in the eye at my father's funeral and lied. She'd burned it every day for 3 years, while she lived in luxury, and I worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. I thought about my father's voice on that recording. I was proud of you every single day. Those words had cracked something open inside me, something I'd kept locked away for 3 years. Hope, the hope that maybe I hadn't been a failure, that maybe my father had seen me for who I really was, a man who showed up, who did his job, who loved his family even when they didn't love him back. Ashley had stolen that from me, and now I was going to take it back. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, and walked out of the station into the cold February night. The air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. All I could think about was March 5th, the Grand Riverside Hotel. 300 guests in designer dresses and tailored suits, sipping champagne and celebrating Ashley's engagement. And me standing at the microphone with a folder full of evidence about to show them all exactly who Ashley Sinclair really was. 2 weeks. I could do a lot in 2 weeks. The first 3 days I tracked down Marie Williams, the notary who'd witnessed my father's 2019 will. She was retired now, living in a small house on the edge of Riverside, with a garden full of tomato plants and a porch swing that creaked when the wind blew. She invited me inside, made coffee I didn't drink, and listened while I explained what Ashley had done. I remember Clifford, she said when I finished. She was in her 70s, silver hair, pulled back sharp eyes that didn't miss much. Good man, very clear about his wishes. He wanted everything to go to you, Gerald. He told me you were the only one who cared. Would you be willing to testify to that? I asked. In front of my daughter and her guests, Marie didn't hesitate. Absolutely. I still have my notary records from that day. I'll bring them. The next 2 days, I visited Father Mike at St. Mary's. He was waiting for me in the church office, a small room that smelled like old books and candle wax. Rosa called, he said, before I could speak. She told me you might need to talk. You witnessed my father's will in 2019, Kaka? I said. Do you remember what he said that day? Father Mike nodded slowly. He said, Father, I'm leaving everything to my son, Gerald. Not because the others don't deserve it, but because they've shown me who they truly are. And Gerald, he's the one who loved me when I needed it most. Will you testify? I'll do more than testify, Gerald. I'll pray for you. Because what you're about to do, it's going to hurt. But it's the right thing. By the end of the first week, I met Rosa Martinez at a coffee shop downtown. She cried before I even sat down. Mr. Gerald, I'm so sorry. She said, her accent thickening with emotion. I wanted to tell you 3 years ago what your children did, but I was afraid. Tell me now. She pulled a napkin from the dispenser and wiped her eyes. Your father, he was so lonely at the end. Miss Ashley and Mr. Marcus, they never came. Once, maybe twice in 6 months, your father would sit by the window waiting. He'd ask me, Rosa, do you think they'll visit today? And I'd have to say, maybe tomorrow, Mr. Clifford. Her voice broke. But you called every night. You visited every week, even when you were exhausted from your shifts. Your father loved you so much. Will you tell that to everyone at the party? Yes, she whispered. I'll tell them. The second week felt longer. I spent 3 nights at home rereading my father's journal, every entry deepening my resolve and my grief. This wasn't just about building a case. This was about grieving all over again. Grieving for the father I'd lost and the daughter I thought I had. On day 12, I went to a thrift store and bought a black suit. My first new suit in 10 years. $75. A chunk of my paycheck, but I needed to look presentable. Ashley had made it clear I was expected to dress appropriately for her world. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and wrote notes on index cards. My speech, the evidence. What I'd say when I stood at that microphone. I practiced 100 times, but every time I imagined facing Ashley, my voice caught. Because no matter what she'd done, she was still my daughter. On day 13, my phone rang. Ashley. Tita. Her voice was bright, cheerful. Just wanted to make sure you're still coming to the party. I forced myself to stay calm. I'll be there. Great. Oh, and Dad, make sure you dress nicely, okay? It's black tie. I know you don't have a tux, but just wear something that looks decent. Her tone was condescending, dismissive, like I was an embarrassment she had to manage. I'll be there, Ashley, I said quietly. I promise. She had no idea that in 6 days, I'd stand in front of her and 300 guests and destroy the lie she'd built. The night before the party, I sat alone in my apartment. The yellow envelope, the journal, the Polaroid photo, the key, everything that represented my father's love and Ashley's betrayal spread across my coffee table. I picked up the photo from 1985. Me at 7, sitting on my father's lap, both of us smiling over a chessboard. I traced his face with my finger. For a moment, I thought about calling it off, letting Ashley keep the money, walking away. But then I heard my father's voice from the recording. Don't let her win, son. Fight for what's yours. Fight for the truth. I set the photo down and looked at my reflection in the window. Exhausted, grieving, but determined. Tomorrow I would walk into that ballroom. Tomorrow I would face my daughter. And tomorrow the truth would finally come out. My alarm clock read 11:47 p.m., March 4th, 2022. In less than 24 hours, everything would change. I thought about what Dan had said. Are you ready for this? Once you do it, there's no going back. I wasn't sure I was ready. How could anyone be ready to destroy their own child in front of hundreds of people? But Ashley had made her choice 3 years ago when she forged that will. When she looked me in the eye at my father's funeral and lied. When she let me believe I was a failure. She'd burned the bridge between us long before I struck the match. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Riverside was quiet, the streets empty except for the occasional car passing under the streetlights. Somewhere across town, Ashley was probably asleep in her penthouse, dreaming about her perfect engagement party, about the champagne and the speeches and the 300 guests who'd tell her how beautiful she looked, how lucky Philip was, how bright her future seemed. She had no idea that tomorrow her future would shatter. I turned away from the window and went to bed. But I didn't sleep. I just lay there in the dark, rehearsing my speech one more time, imagining the look on Ashley's face when she realized I knew everything. Tomorrow, March 5th, the day I'd been preparing for 2 weeks, the day everything changed. By 7 that evening, the ballroom at the Grand Riverside Hotel had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale, or maybe a nightmare depending on where you stood. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting soft light over tables draped in ivory linen. White roses and gold accents decorated every surface. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. 300 guests dressed in evening gowns and tailored tuxedos. Attorneys, business executives, socialites sipped champagne and laughed as if the world outside these walls didn't exist. I stood just inside the entrance, tugging at the collar of my thrift store suit. $75 at Goodwill, and it still felt too tight. The fabric scratched against my neck, reminding me with every breath that I didn't belong here. But I wasn't here to belong. I was here to take back what was mine. Ashley stood near the center of the ballroom, radiant in a white cocktail dress that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Diamond earrings caught the light as she tilted her head, laughing at something a colleague said. She looked every bit the successful attorney, the proud daughter, the bride-to-be. No one in this room would have guessed she'd stolen $3.3 million from her own father. Philip Crane, her fiancé, stood beside her with his hand resting lightly on her waist. 35, clean-cut, the kind of guy who probably played golf on Sundays. He looked at Ashley like she'd hung the moon. I wondered if he had any idea who he was marrying. Marcus lingered near the bar, nursing scotch, in a designer tuxedo probably paid for with the $500,000 Ashley had transferred to him in January. He caught my eye for half a second, then looked away fast. Good. He should feel the heat. Ashley spotted me and made her way over heels, clicking against the marble floor. She smiled the same smile she'd worn at Dad's funeral. Dad. She said, her voice warm enough to fool anyone listening. I'm so glad you could make it. I forced myself to nod. Wouldn't miss it. Her gaze flicked down to my suit, and for a moment something like pity or maybe contempt crossed her face. You look nice. There's a seat for you in the back near the restrooms. Table 27. I thought you'd be more comfortable there. Table 27. The last table in the room, tucked away in the corner where no one would notice me. Where I wouldn't embarrass her in front of her fancy friends. Thanks, I said, my voice flat. She squeezed my arm and leaned in close. Please don't make a scene tonight, okay? This is important to me. I met her eyes and saw nothing there. No warmth, no recognition. Just cold calculation, the same look she must have had when she buried Dad's real will and forged the fake one. I'll behave, I said. She smiled again, satisfied, and turned back to her guests. I made my way to table 27, weaving through clusters of people who didn't know me and didn't care to. The table was mostly empty. A couple of older folks I didn't recognize sat on the far side, barely glancing up as I took my seat. I was invisible here, exactly where Ashley wanted me. A waiter appeared with Dom Perignon, the label gleaming gold. $300 a bottle, easy. He tipped it toward my glass, but I waved him off. I'm good, I said. I didn't need champagne. I needed clarity. From my corner seat, I watched the room. I watched Ashley work the crowd, shaking hands and air-kissing cheeks like a politician. I watched Marcus knock back another drink, his shoulders tight with tension. I watched Philip's father step up to the microphone. The speeches were starting. Philip's father talked about love and partnership, about how proud he was to welcome Ashley into their family. He didn't mention where her money came from. Didn't mention the grandfather who'd left everything to the one son who'd actually cared. No one in this room knew that story. They only saw the polished surface, the successful lawyer, the engagement party, in a 5-star hotel, the fairy tale romance. They didn't see the lie underneath. Then Ashley took the microphone. She thanked everyone for coming, her voice smooth and practiced. She thanked Philip for loving her. She thanked Marcus for being her rock. And then she turned toward the back of the room, toward table 27, and smiled. And of course, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom, I have to thank my dad, Gerald. He couldn't be here for much of my life, but he's here tonight, and that means the world to me. A few people clapped politely. I felt my jaw tighten. She kept talking, her words flowing like honey. Everything I have, everything I've built, is because of the legacy my grandfather left behind. He taught me the value of hard work, of determination, of never giving up. And I carry that with me every single day. The room erupted in applause. Ashley beamed, soaking it in. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Dan Cooper slid into the seat beside me, his firefighter's build unmistakable even in a borrowed suit. He leaned close, his voice low. You ready? I nodded once. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. Samuel's outside with Marie Rosa and Father Mike, Dan said. They're good to go when you give the word. I took a breath, held it, let it out slow. Ashley was still at the microphone, still smiling, still playing the part of the grateful daughter. 300 people in this room believed her. 300 people had no idea what she'd done, but they were about to find out. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the floor loud enough that a few heads turned. Ashley's eyes found mine across the room. Her smile faltered just for a second. Dan leaned in one more time. "Now!" I stood. I'd walked into burning buildings before. I'd pulled people from car crashes and house fires. But this felt like stepping into a different kind of fire. "Now," I said. I started walking. One foot in front of the other, past table 27, past the guests who were starting to notice, past Marcus, whose face had gone pale, past Dan, who followed 2 steps behind. Ashley was still holding the microphone. Her smile was frozen now, her eyes wide as I closed the distance. I reached out, and I took the mic from her hand. The ballroom fell silent the moment the microphone left Ashley's hand and settled into mine. 300 faces turned toward me, some curious, some annoyed at the interruption, a few leaning forward like they sensed something was about to break wide open. Ashley's smile froze. Philip looked confused, glancing between me and his fiancée. Marcus, over by the bar, had gone pale, his glass of scotch halfway to his lips. My hands trembled as I gripped the mic. The weight of it felt heavier than any hose I'd ever carried, heavier than any body I'd pulled from the rubble. I thought of Dad's voice on the recording, steady and sure. "Don't let them win, son. Fight for the truth." I held on. Ashley forced a laugh, the sound brittle and too loud. "Dad, what are you doing? We can save family speeches for later." "I need to say this," I said, cutting her off. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Right now." Her smile slipped. Just a fraction, but I saw it. I took a breath and looked out at the crowd. Attorneys, business executives, socialites in their evening gowns and diamond jewelry. People who'd built their lives on appearances, on polished surfaces. People who had no idea what was about to happen. 3 years ago, my father Clifford Sinclair passed away. At his funeral, my daughter Ashley told me something that broke my heart. The room went completely still. She told me that my father had been disappointed in me, that he thought I'd wasted my life being a firefighter instead of pursuing something more successful. She told me he'd left me $50,000 to buy a decent car, and that the rest of his estate, $3.5 million, was going to her and my son Marcus. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I saw heads turning, guests leaning toward each other. Ashley's face had gone white. "So I believed her," I said. My voice cracked just a little, and I swallowed hard. For 3 years, I carried the shame of thinking my father had died ashamed of me. I worked double shifts to make ends meet in my 400-square-foot apartment, while my daughter lived in an $800,000 penthouse. I thought I deserved it. I thought I'd let him down. Ashley stepped forward, her voice rising with panic. "Dad, this isn't the time!" "But 2 weeks ago," I said louder, now my voice cutting through hers. "On my 58th birthday, I received a package. A yellow envelope. It was sent by my father. And inside that envelope was the truth." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the envelope, the same one Samuel had handed me that cold February morning. I held it up so everyone could see it. The wax seal with Dad's initials. The handwriting that said to Gerald, "Open on your 58th birthday." The crowd leaned in. Philip stepped closer to Ashley, his brow furrowed. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. A voice called out from the crowd. Victoria Harper, one of Ashley's colleagues, her tone sharp with curiosity. "Gerald, what are you talking about?" I met her eyes. Then I looked back at Ashley. "My father didn't leave me $50,000, I said. "He left me 95% of his estate, $3.325 million. Gasps, sharp intakes of breath. Someone in the back row stood up to get a better view. A woman near the front covered her mouth with her hand. The whispers turned into a low roar of shock voices overlapping in disbelief. Ashley grabbed Philip's arm, her knuckles white. "This is insane. He's lying. It's the will Ashley showed me at the funeral." I continued, my voice rising over hers. "It was a fake. She forged it. She took the real will, the one my father signed in March 2019, and she buried it. Then she filed a fraudulent will with the probate court and stole my inheritance." "That's a lie." Ashley's voice cracked, her composure shattering. "Dad, She spent 3 years living off my father's money," I said, cutting her off again. "Money that he left to me. Money she had no right to touch." The crowd erupted. Voices overlapped, sharp and incredulous. "Is this real? Ashley, what is he talking about? Oh my God." Philip turned to Ashley, his voice loud enough for the front rows to hear. "Ashley, what the hell is going on? Did you steal money from your own father?" Ashley stepped back, her face crumpling. No, he's lying. He's trying to ruin everything." Philip stared at her, his jaw tight. "Then explain it. Explain why he's standing up here saying this in front of 300 people." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I didn't let her recover. I held up the envelope again, my hand steady now. "Chatu Samuel Porter was my father's attorney." I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "He witnessed the real will, and tonight he's going to tell you exactly what happened." I turned and held the microphone out toward the edge of the crowd. Samuel Porter stepped forward, his face lined with age and something heavier, guilt maybe, or the weight of 3 years spent carrying a secret. He held a worn leather briefcase in one hand, the kind lawyers used to carry decades ago. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a thick stack of documents bound with a red ribbon. Ashley's eyes went wide when she saw him. Marcus took a step back, his face ashen. The room went dead silent. Samuel took the mic from me. His hand trembled, but his voice when he spoke was clear. "My name is Samuel Porter," he said. 3 years ago, I helped Ashley Sinclair commit fraud. And tonight, I'm going to tell you everything." Ashley's face crumbled. Marcus looked like he wanted to run. Philip let go of Ashley's arm and took a step back, staring at her like he'd never seen her before. And Samuel began to speak. Samuel stood before the microphone, holding the will in his weathered hands. The ballroom, 300 people packed into a space meant for celebration, had gone dead silent. Every eye was on him. He cleared his throat and held the document up so the crowd could see the seal, the signatures, the date stamped across the top. On March 18, 2019. Samuel began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Clifford Sinclair came to my office. He was 82 years old and his health was failing. He told me he wanted to revise his will one final time." He paused, letting the weight of that date settle over the room. "When this," Samuel said, lifting the document higher, "is the real will. Notarized, witnessed, legally binding. In it, Clifford left 95% of his estate, $3.325 million, to his son Gerald. He left nothing to Ashley or Marcus, and 5% went to the firefighters' widows fund." The room erupted. Not in shouts, but in whispers, sharp, disbelieving, layered over each other like static. Victoria Harper shot to her feet. "That can't be right. Ashley told us her grandfather left her most of the estate because she was his favorite." Samuel raised a hand, silencing them. "Because," he said, his voice heavy, "in the last 2 years of Clifford's life, Ashley and Marcus abandoned him." A woman near the front gasped. Samuel nodded toward Rosa Martinez, who stood clutching a tissue, her face lined with grief. "Charlie," Samuel said gently, "tell them." Rosa stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "I was Mr. Clifford's caregiver from 2017 until he passed in 2019. In those 2 years, Miss Ashley visited maybe 6 times. Marcus 4, and they only came when they needed something, money papers, a signature." Her voice broke. "But Gerald, he called every single night after his shift. He visited every weekend. He was the only one who loved Mr. Clifford until the very end. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Ashley, whose face had gone pale as chalk. Then Father Michael O'Connor stepped forward, his collar gleaming white under the chandeliers. "I witnessed Mr. Clifford's will on March 18, 2019, he said. "I was there when he signed it. He looked me in the eye and said, 'Father, I'm leaving everything to Gerald because he's the only one who deserves it.'" The murmurs grew louder. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Marie Williams, the notary, stepped up next. She was a small woman in her 60s holding a worn leather journal. "I notarized this will on March 18, 2019. She said, her voice crisp and professional. "Clifford Sinclair signed it in my presence. His signature is authentic. I have the records to prove it." The room was silent again. All eyes turned back to Samuel. He took a breath and continued. 4 days after Clifford passed, on April 18, 2019, Ashley came to my office. His voice hardened. She offered me $500,000 to bury this will and file an older one from 2016 that she'd altered. Gasps. Sharp intakes of breath. The crowd turned to stare at Ashley, who was trembling visibly now. "I took the money," Samuel said, his voice raw with guilt. "My wife was dying of cancer, and I was desperate. I buried the real will and filed Ashley's fake one with the probate court." The room exploded. Voices overlapped. "She paid him off. This is fraud." Said Ashley, "Is this true?" Samuel raised his hand again, and Dan Cooper nodded toward the projector screen. The lights dimmed slightly, and the screen flickered to life. Bank statements. Line after line of transactions projected in stark black and white. Samuel read them aloud. Trust fund balance $2.5 million. April 25, 2019. Transfer to Ashley Sinclair, $2.5 million. The crowd stared at the screen. From June 2019 to December 2021, Samuel continued. Ashley withdrew a total of $1.175 million. $400,000 for a penthouse down payment, $550,000 in lifestyle expenses, $125,000 on designer clothing, $100,000 on travel. He paused. In January 2022, she transferred $500,000 to Marcus Sinclair. The screen showed every transaction in cold, undeniable detail. Victoria Harper stood again, her face twisted in horror. "Ashley, you told us your grandfather left you everything." A man in a suit rose to his feet. "This is fraud. Ashley, is this real?" Philip Crane stepped forward, his voice loud enough to carry across the ballroom. "Ashley, answer them. Did you steal from your own father?" Ashley's face crumbled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Her voice came out choked and desperate. "You don't understand, I didn't." I stepped forward and took the microphone back from Samuel. "Didn't what, Ashley?" I said, my voice steady and cold. "Didn't lie to me at your grandfather's funeral. Didn't forge a will, didn't spend 3 years living off money that wasn't yours." Ashley opened her mouth, but no words came. "Grandpa wanted me to have it," she finally cried. "He didn't tell you anything?" I said. "Because in the last months of his life you barely visited him. You left him to die alone." Every eye shifted to Marcus, who stood near the exit, his face ashen. "Marcus," I said, "do you want to tell everyone how much Ashley paid you to keep quiet?" Marcus's voice, when it came, was barely audible. I didn't know she forged the will. She told me Grandpa changed his mind, and she gave you $500,000, Marcus," I said. "You took it and stayed silent while I struggled to pay rent." Marcus's knees buckled. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." But I'd already turned back to Ashley. Philip stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. He grabbed Ashley's hand, the one with the diamond engagement ring. "You lied to me," he said, his voice shaking. For 3 years. How much of our life together was paid for with stolen money, the penthouse. This ring, this entire party. He yanked the ring off her finger and threw it to the floor. It bounced once, the diamond catching the light. It's over, Philip said. He turned and walked out. Half the crowd watched him go. The other half stared at Ashley with shock and disgust. I reached into my jacket and pulled out Dad's leather journal. There's one more thing everyone needs to hear, I said. My father kept a journal for the last 2 years of his life, and every single page is a record of how Ashley and Marcus treated him. I opened the journal. I'm going to read it, I said, all of it. Before I open this journal and show you what's inside, tell me how invested are you in this story right now? Rate it 1 to 10 in the comments. I want to see who's still with me. Quick reminder. The narrative ahead contains some fictional details crafted for emotional impact and learning. If you'd rather not continue, this is your moment to step away. I stood before the microphone, the leather journal open in my hands. The ballroom had gone silent again, 300 people holding their breath, waiting. The only sound was Ashley's soft sobbing from somewhere behind me. I cleared my throat and began to read. March 12th, 2017. I said. Ashley came to visit today. She asked about the estate plan again. Again. This is the 3rd time this month. I'm starting to think she only comes when she wants something. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I didn't look up. I kept reading. September 8th, 2017. I fell in the kitchen today. I called Ashley. She said she was too busy with a case. I called Marcus. No answer. I called Gerald. He was there in 20 minutes and stayed with me all night at the hospital. Rosa pressed a tissue to her eyes. Several guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. January 15th, 2018. I continued. Ashley and Marcus stopped by today. First time in 4 months. They spent the whole visit photographing the house and asking about property values. They didn't ask how I was feeling. More whispers. I turned the page. June 22nd, 2018. My voice wavered, but I forced it steady. My medication was moved again. I can't find my heart pills. Ashley was here yesterday going through my office. When I asked her, she said I must have misplaced them. But I didn't. I'm starting to wonder if I stopped. Let the implication hang in the air. A guest gasped. Wait, is he saying? Victoria Harper stood, her voice sharp with horror. Ashley, did you tamper with your grandfather's medication? Ashley's voice cracked. No, I never did that. He's lying. But the murmurs in the room said otherwise. People were starting to understand. I turned another page. November 3rd, 2018. I read. I haven't seen Ashley or Marcus in weeks. I hired a caregiver, Rosa. Gerald doesn't know. I don't want him to feel guilty. He works too hard already. Rosa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I flipped to the last entry. My hands trembled as I read the date. March 5th, 2019. My voice broke. I had to stop, swallow, gather myself. Tears blurred my vision, but I wiped them away and kept going. I signed the new will today. 95% to Gerald. Nothing for Ashley and Marcus. Samuel asked if I was sure. I'm sure. Gerald is the only one who loves me. The room was dead silent. I read the final lines, my voice barely above a whisper. If something happens to me, Samuel will give Gerald the truth, and Ashley and Marcus will face the consequences of their choices. Gerald, you were never a disappointment. You are my son, and I love you. Tears rolled down my face. I closed the journal slowly, the leather creaking under my fingers. My father died believing you would face justice, Ashley, I said, looking at her. And tonight, that's exactly what's happening. Ashley collapsed. Not a stumble, A full collapse, her knees hitting the floor, her hands clutching at the edge of a table. She sobbed uncontrollably, mascara streaking down her face. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she cried. I needed the money. I had loans, debts. The law firm was so competitive." "So you stole from your own father," I said. "You made me believe my father was ashamed of me so you could live in a penthouse." Ashley's voice rose to a shriek. "I was going to tell you, I was going to pay you back. I swear." "When Ashley," I said, "after you'd spent it all." Marcus staggered forward, his face ashen. His voice came out broken, barely audible. "Dad, I'm sorry," he said. "Ashley told me Grandpa changed the will because he thought you didn't need the money. She said you'd be fine with 50,000. I didn't know she forged it until when Marcus," his voice cracked, "until a year ago. I was 22. She told me the truth and gave me $500,000 to keep quiet. She said if I told you, we'd both lose everything. I took it. I'm a coward, Dad. I'm so sorry." I stared at him. My son. 23 years old, and he'd been manipulated by his sister since he was 19. Part of me wanted to reach out to tell him I understood. But not yet. Not here. Victoria Harper stepped forward, her expression cold. "Ashley," she said, "as of this moment, you are suspended from the firm pending investigation. If these allegations are true, you will be disbarred and face criminal prosecution." An older man in the crowd stood Judge Morrison, a family court judge who'd known Dad. "Gerald Watsu," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "I knew your father. He was a good man. What Ashley did constitutes fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and embezzlement. I will personally ensure this case goes to trial as quickly as possible." The crowd began to move. One by one, guests stood and walked toward the exits. Some shook my hand as they passed. Others stared at Ashley with disgust. "I can't believe she did that. To her own father. She seemed so perfect. And in front of 300 people. Within minutes, half the room was empty. Ashley was left kneeling on the floor, mascara smudged, surrounded by broken glass and scattered roses. I walked over and crouched down so I was eye level with her. My voice was quiet, almost gentle. "But you made me believe I was nothing, Ashley," I said. "You made me carry that shame for 3 years while you lived off stolen money. But you know what? You were wrong. Dad was proud of me, and that's something you can never take away." Ashley sobbed. "Dad, please." I stood up. "See you in court." I turned and walked toward the exit. Dan, Samuel, Rosa, Marie, and Father Mike fell into step beside me. As we left, the door swung shut behind us, the heavy wood muffling the sound of Ashley's crying. That night I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because exposing the truth meant losing my children. But it also meant honoring my father's wishes. And that was enough. 48 hours after the engagement party, I sat in my apartment, exhausted. My phone had been ringing non-stop for 2 days. News outlets, reporters, Dad's old colleagues, everyone wanted to talk. On my laptop screen, I scrolled through the headlines. Riverside attorney accused of $3.3 million estate fraud. Riverside Daily. Daughter allegedly forged will stole father's inheritance. Regional Forum. Engagement party turns into courtroom drama. Viral social media posts. The story had spread faster than I'd imagined. Within 48 hours, everyone in Riverside knew Ashley's name. And mine. My phone buzzed. Dan's name lit up the screen. "Dan," I said, answering. "You seen the news? All of it. You holding up?" I rubbed my eyes. "I don't know anymore. I keep thinking about her face when Philip walked out, when the crowd turned on her. She looked destroyed. Well, she brought this on herself, Gerald." "I know," I said quietly. "But she's still my daughter. There was a pause on the other end. Then Dan said, "You're a better man than I am." At the law firm downtown, Ashley sat across from Victoria Harper in a cold, sterile conference room. Victoria's expression was carved from stone. "Ashley," Victoria said, her voice clipped, "the firm's ethics board has reviewed the evidence presented at your engagement party. We have no choice but to suspend you immediately pending a full investigation." Ashley's voice came out hollow. "Victoria, I can explain." There's nothing to explain," Victoria said. "You committed fraud. You forged legal documents. You stole from your own father. Do you understand what this means for the firm's reputation?" Ashley's voice dropped to a whisper. "I understand." "Your license is under review by the state bar," Victoria continued. "You'll likely be disbarred within 6 months, and if the district attorney presses charges, which they will, you'll be facing prison time." Ashley left the firm carrying a box of personal belongings. Reporters and photographers were waiting outside. "See, Ashley, did you forge your grandfather's will? How much money did you steal? Do you have anything to say to your father?" Ashley pushed through the crowd, head down, and climbed into a cab. The door slammed shut, and she was gone. Marcus sat in a coffee shop, his laptop open. His phone rang. The investor. "Marcus." The voice on the other end said, "We've seen the news. The board voted to pull our funding. We can't be associated with this scandal." Marcus's voice cracked. "Wait. Please, I wasn't involved in forging the will. You took $500,000 in hush money, Marcus. That's complicity. We're out." The call ended. Marcus stared at the screen, investment withdrawn. I sat in Judge Morrison's office, the leather chair creaking under me. The judge reviewed the documents I'd brought: Samuel's testimony, the bank statements, Dad's journal. "Gerald," Judge Morrison said, looking up, "this is one of the clearest cases of estate fraud I've seen in 30 years. The district attorney is moving forward with charges. They have enough evidence, they don't need your cooperation to prosecute." I leaned forward. "What's Ashley looking at?" 5 to 10 years for fraud, forgery, and embezzlement, the judge said. Marcus could face 2 to 5 as an accomplice, plus restitution fines and permanent criminal records. I swallowed hard. "Is there any other option?" Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair. "You could work with the DA on a plea deal. If Ashley pleads guilty and agrees to the terms, she could get probation instead of prison time." "Probation," I said. "A suspended sentence," he explained. "Typically 2 years in prison, suspended meaning she wouldn't serve time unless she violates the conditions. She'd be on probation for 5 years. Court-ordered community service, mandatory therapy, full restitution. And if she screws up even once, misses a therapy session, skips community service, fails a drug test, she goes to prison immediately. No second chances." I stared at the desk. "And Marcus, the DA might not charge Marcus if he cooperates," Judge Morrison said. "He was manipulated by Ashley, and he's already lost his business. But Ashley, she's the one who orchestrated this. The DA wants her." "I need time to think," I said. Judge Morrison nodded. "Take the time you need. But Gerald, your father wanted justice. This is justice, just not the kind that requires bars and a cell. Sometimes mercy and accountability can coexist. You get to decide which path serves both." When I returned to Fire Station number 14 for my next shift, my colleagues greeted me with a mix of support and curiosity. "Gerald, man, I saw the news," Jake said. "That's crazy what your daughter did." Maria stepped closer. "You okay? You need a few days off?" "I'm fine," I said. "I just want to work." Dan pulled me aside. "People are asking about you. Some of them want to donate money to help with legal fees." I shook my head. "Tell them no. I don't need charity. I just need normal." Back at my apartment, I found my mailbox overflowing. Inside were dozens of letters from strangers who'd read the story online. Dear Mr. Sinclair, I'm so sorry for what your daughter did. My sister stole my mother's estate too. I know how much it hurts. Stay strong, Gerald. You're a hero for standing up for the truth. Your father would be proud. But not everyone was supportive. You humiliated your daughter in front of 300 people. What kind of father does that? You should be ashamed. Not everyone understood. Some people thought I was cruel for exposing Ashley at her engagement party. They called me vindictive, heartless. But they didn't know the whole story. They hadn't carried the shame for 3 years. My phone buzzed. A text from Ashley. Dad, please. Can we talk? I need to explain. Please don't send me to prison. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let the courts decide her fate. But another part, the part that still remembered her as a little girl, couldn't let go. I typed a reply. Meet me at St. Mary's Church tomorrow, 10 a.m., come alone. I hit send. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I was ready to listen. Because that's what my father would have done. The next morning, I walked into that church, not knowing if I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the most important decision. I sat in the front pew of St. Mary's Church alone. Morning light filtered through the stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the worn wooden floor. The church was silent except for the distant hum of traffic outside. The door creaked open. Ashley stepped inside. She didn't look anything like the polished attorney from the engagement party. No makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. Her eyes were red and swollen. She wore jeans and an old sweater. Dad, she said, her voice hesitant. I didn't look at her. Sit down. She sat beside me, leaving a gap between us. I don't know where to start, she said. Start with the truth, I said. Ashley took a deep breath. When Grandpa died, I was drowning in debt. Student loans, credit cards. I was struggling. I was afraid of failing. So you stole, I said. I panicked. When Samuel showed me Grandpa's real will, the one that left you 95%, I thought it was unfair. I'd worked so hard. And you were just a firefighter. I flinched. She kept going, tears streaming. I convinced myself Grandpa was confused, that he'd want me to have the money if he knew how much I needed it. So I forged a new will and paid Samuel to bury the real one. And you let me believe Dad was ashamed of me, I said. Ashley sobbed. I know. I'm so sorry. I told myself it was just a small lie, that you'd be fine with 50,000. I didn't think it would hurt you this much. I finally looked at her. My eyes were hard, but there was grief in them too. You didn't think about me at all, Ashley. For 3 years you watched me struggle. You saw me in that tiny apartment working double shifts, and you never said a word. I wanted to tell you. Every time I saw you, I almost... But you didn't, I said. You chose the money, the penthouse, the lifestyle, the lies, and you dragged Marcus into it too. Ashley's voice broke. I know. I destroyed everything. My career, Philip, Marcus's business, and us. Footsteps echoed from the back of the church. Father Michael O'Connor walked down the aisle. Gerald, Ashley, he said. May I join you? Please, I said. Father Mike sat across from us. I've been praying for both of you, he said. Gerald, I know you're facing an impossible choice. Justice or mercy. My father wanted justice, I said. He left evidence so Ashley would face consequences. He did, Father Mike said. But he also loved you. And part of loving you was trusting you to decide what justice looks like. I turned back to Ashley. Yesterday I met with the district attorney. She told me they're prosecuting you whether I cooperate or not. The evidence is too strong. Ashley's face went white. You could face 5 to 10 years in prison, but the DA offered a plea deal. If you plead guilty, they'll recommend a suspended sentence. 2 years in prison suspended. You won't go to jail unless you violate the conditions. Ashley's voice shook. What conditions? 5 years probation, I said. 1,000 hours of court-ordered community service. Mandatory therapy every week for 2 years. And you'll pay back every dollar, 3.325 million plus restitution. Father Mike leaned forward. And if she violates probation, she goes to prison immediately, I said. No trial, no second chance. 2 years. Ashley's voice came out choked. Dad, if you want them to prosecute me fully, I understand. I deserve it. But please know I never stopped loving you. My voice turned hard. Love isn't stealing from someone and watching them suffer. Love is showing up. Caring. What I did for Grandpa while you were too busy to visit. Ashley's voice rose almost a wail. I know. I know I let him down. I let you down. I don't deserve forgiveness. I stood and walked to the altar, staring up at the cross. I thought about Dad, about his journal entries, about how he'd been abandoned by the people he loved most, and I thought about what he would want me to do. I turned back to Ashley. I told the DA I'd cooperate if you take the plea deal. Ashley's breath caught. You did. I'm not letting you walk away, I said. You'll plead guilty in court. You'll be sentenced. You'll serve 5 years probation. And if you screw up even once, if you miss therapy, skip community service, fail a drug test, leave the state without permission, you go to prison. Understand. I understand, she whispered. The plea hearing is in 2 weeks. Your lawyer will walk you through it. After you're sentenced, you'll start probation. You'll report to a probation officer every month. I pulled out a handwritten note. This part isn't court-ordered. This is from me. You'll write a public apology. Admit what you did apologize to me and to Grandpa's memory and post it online. The DA doesn't care about this, but I do, Ashley sobbed. I'll do everything, and the money. You have 90 days to liquidate everything and transfer it back, sell the penthouse, figure it out. That money was never yours. She nodded, defeated. I will. I turned to Father Mike. Will you monitor her? I will, he said. I walked toward the door. I stopped at the threshold, not turning around. But if you complete your probation all 5 years, I'll consider letting you back into my life. Not as my daughter. Not yet. But as someone I might be able to forgive someday. Ashley's voice broke. I love you. I paused. I know. I walked out into the morning light. 2 weeks after our meeting at the church, Ashley stood in a courtroom and pleaded guilty to fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. Judge Harrison looked down at her from the bench. Ms. Sinclair, you are hereby sentenced to 2 years in prison, suspended with 5 years probation. You will complete 1,000 hours of court-ordered community service. You will attend mandatory therapy weekly for 2 years. You will pay full restitution of $3.325 million plus interest. If you violate any condition, you will serve the full 2-year sentence. Do you understand? Ashley's voice was barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Report to your probation officer, Ms. Carter, within 48 hours. This court is adjourned. For the next 90 days, from late March to June, Ashley lived under the court's watch. Ashley stood in her penthouse, now empty. A realtor handed her papers. We sold it for $825. After fees and mortgage, you'll net about $600,000. Ashley's voice was hollow. Transfer it to my father's account. She moved into a studio on the other side of town. Ashley's probation officer, Ms. Carter, assigned her community service at the Firefighters' Widows Fund. You'll report here every Saturday and Sunday, Ms. Carter said, handing Ashley a log sheet. 8 hours per day. I'll be checking in randomly. If you miss a single hour, you're in violation. I understand, Ashley said. Helen Torres, the director, greeted her sternly. I read the court order, Helen said. Your father is a good man, one of the best firefighters this city's ever seen. Let's see if you have even a fraction of his character. Ashley spent her days organizing fundraisers, calling widows, sorting applications, and listening to stories of loss. One afternoon, Patricia Evans, a widow in her 70s, spoke to Ashley. "My husband died in a warehouse fire in 1998, Patricia said. "He saved 3 children. Your father was on his crew. Gerald held my hand at the funeral and promised I'd never be abandoned." Ashley's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know that." "Your father is a hero," Patricia said. "I hope you realize that." Ashley attended therapy with Dr. Laura Bennett. "Why did you make these choices?" Dr. Bennett asked. "I wanted to be more than just the firefighter's daughter," Ashley said. "And stealing from your father proved that." Ashley's voice broke. "No, it proved I was a coward." Memories surfaced. Ashley at 10, a classmate sneering, "My dad's a lawyer, that's cooler." Ashley at 16 arguing with Gerald, "Why can't you be a doctor or lawyer?" "I spent my whole life being ashamed of my father," Ashley said. "I became everything I thought would make me better than him. But I was wrong. He was the one with integrity." Ashley posted a public apology online. "My name is Ashley Sinclair. 3 months ago, I committed fraud. I forged my grandfather's will and stole $3.3 million from my father, Gerald Sinclair. I lied to him for 3 years. I manipulated my brother. I betrayed everyone who loved me. There is no excuse. I am working to make amends through court-ordered community service therapy and restitution. To Dad, I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone you can be proud of." Signed, Ashley Sinclair. The post went viral. Comments poured in, "Takes courage." "Too late. She should be in prison." Ms. Carter appeared at Ashley's apartment unannounced. Random check. "Have you been attending therapy?" Ashley showed her the log. "Every week. Community service hours. 320 so far." Ms. Carter reviewed the documents. "You're doing well, but don't get comfortable. 4.5 more years. One slip and you're done." After Ms. Carter left, Ashley stared at the court order on her wall. 2 years suspended. 5 years probation. One mistake and it all collapses. Gerald read Ashley's post on his phone. Dan sat beside him. "What do you think?" Dan asked. "I think she's trying," Gerald said. "Whether it's genuine or survival, I don't know. But she's on probation for 5 years. If she's faking it, she won't last. And if she does last," Gerald looked out the window, "then maybe there's hope." Marcus appeared at fire station number 14 one evening, thinner and exhausted. "Dad, can we talk?" "What do you want, Marcus?" "I got a construction job. $18 an hour. I'm going to pay you back every dollar, $500 a month. It'll take years, but I'll do it." "You don't have to." "I do. I took that money knowing it was wrong." Gerald saw genuine remorse. "Okay. And Marcus, go to therapy. Figure out why you let Ashley manipulate you. The DA didn't charge you because you cooperated, but you need to understand what happened." Marcus nodded. "I will, Dad," Samuel called. "Gerald, the transfer is complete. 3.325 million in your account. The rural house is in your name. Your father's watch has been returned." Gerald stared at the balance. 3.3 million, the number I'd dreamed about. But now it felt hollow. No amount of money could bring Dad back. I drove to Dad's grave for the first time since the engagement party. I needed to tell him I'd fought for the truth, that I'd honored his wishes, and that I'd chosen mercy over revenge. 1 year later, I returned to his grave, and this time, I didn't come alone. I stood before Dad's grave in Riverside Cemetery. It was a simple granite headstone, Clifford James Sinclair, 1937 to 2019. Beloved father and grandfather. Integrity is choosing courage over comfort. I placed fresh white roses, his favorite, on the grave. "Hey, Dad," I said quietly. "It's been a year. I figured I should update you on everything." I sat on the grass beside the headstone and pulled out Dad's pocket watch. I'd had it repaired, and now I wore it every day. I traced the inscription engraved on the back. "To Gerald. Always proud of you, Dad." "I got the money back," I said. "All of it. The house, the trust fund, the watch. Samuel made sure everything was transferred legally. You'd be proud of him. He finally did the right thing." I paused, staring at the watch. Ashley. She completed her 1,000 hours of court-ordered community service 2 months ago. Helen Torres told me she was one of the most dedicated people they'd ever had. She's halfway through her probation now, year 2 of 5. Still going to therapy, still posting updates online about her progress. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a post Ashley had made 6 months ago. Month 6 of my redemption journey. Today I helped organize a fundraiser for firefighter families. I met a widow whose husband died saving people in 2003. She told me, "Your father visits me every year on the anniversary. He never forgot." I'm learning what real heroism looks like. And it looks like my dad. I set the phone down. "I don't know if she's really changed, Dad. But I think she's trying. Marcus is doing better too," I continued. "He's still paying me back $500 a month like clockwork. He got promoted to foreman at the construction site. He called me last week and said he's proud to be my son." My voice caught. That's the first time he said that since he was a kid. I looked up at the sky. "I moved out of that apartment. I'm living in your rural house now, the one at 847 Mountain View Road. It's quiet, peaceful. I can see why you loved it so much." I smiled, remembering the day I'd walked through the house for the first time in years. 3 bedrooms, big windows, surrounded by trees. I was fixing it up slowly, one room at a time. "I retired from the fire department last month," I said. "After 31 years. They threw me a ceremony." Dan gave a speech. He said, "Gerald Sinclair saved 47 lives during his career. But the most important thing he saved was his integrity." "I started a scholarship fund," I said. "The Clifford Sinclair Firefighter Family Scholarship. It helps kids from firefighter families pay for college. The first recipient is a girl named Emma. Her dad died in the line of duty in 2020. She wants to be a nurse." I smiled. "You would have loved her dad. She reminds me of Ashley. Before everything went wrong, I heard a car door close behind me. I turned. Ashley was walking toward me holding a bouquet of white roses. She'd changed. Her hair was shorter, her makeup minimal, her clothes simple. She looked older, more tired, but also softer. "Hi, Dad," she said hesitantly. I blinked, surprised. "Ashley, what are you doing here?" "I come here every month," she said. "To visit Grandpa's grave. Father Mike told me you might be here today." We stood on opposite sides of the grave, neither of us sure what to say. Can I sit down?" Ashley asked quietly. "It's a public place," I said. Ashley sat on the grass and placed her bouquet next to mine. "I completed my 1,000 hours last month," Ashley said. "Ms. Torres wrote me a letter of recommendation. She said I reminded her of you, that I had the same work ethic." "That's high praise from Helen," I said. "I know." She paused. "I'm working at a legal aid office now, helping low-income families with estate planning, pro bono. The pay's not much, but it feels right." "Good," I said. "I've been in therapy for a year now," Ashley continued. "Dr. Bennett says I'm making progress. I'm learning how to not measure my worth by money or status anymore." She looked down at her hands. "I'm still on probation, year 2 of 5. I report to Ms. Carter every month. I know I have a long way to go. But I'm trying, Dad. Every day I'm trying. Ashley's voice broke. I know I can never undo what I did. I stole from you. I lied to you. I made you believe Grandpa was ashamed of you when the truth was, he loved you more than anything. I looked at her. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I just want you to know I'm trying. Every day I'm trying to become the person Grandpa thought I could be. I was silent for a long time. Then I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small, worn envelope. Grandpa left this for you, I said. I found it in his journal. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but I think he'd want you to have it now. Ashley's eyes widened. What is it? Read it, I said. Ashley opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note dated March 2019. She read it aloud, tears streaming down her face. Dear Ashley, if you're reading this, it means you've made mistakes. Big ones. And it means Gerald found the truth. I didn't leave you money because I wanted you to learn something. I failed to teach you that wealth isn't what you own, it's who you are. You're smart, Ashley. But intelligence without integrity is just cunning. I hope someday you'll understand that your father, the firefighter you were once ashamed of, is worth more than 1,000 lawyers. Because he saves people. He shows up. He loves unconditionally. If you're reading this, I hope you're trying to become someone worthy of his forgiveness. If not, then I made the right decision. Love, Grandpa, Ashley sobbed, clutching the letter. I stood up and brushed off my jeans. I looked down at her. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, Ashley, I said. But I'm not angry anymore either. Ashley looked up at me. What does that mean? It means keep going, keep working, keep trying. And maybe in a few years we can have a real conversation. Not as strangers, but as family. Ashley's voice was filled with hope. Really, I said. But only if you keep trying. I walked back to my truck. I stopped and looked back at Ashley, still sitting by the grave. I didn't know if we'd ever be close again. But for the first time in a year, I felt hope. Maybe that was enough. 2 years after that engagement party, I finally understood what my father's legacy was really about. The house smelled like home. I stood at the stove in my farmhouse kitchen, 847 Mountain View Lane, the house my father left me stirring gravy while Dan set the table. It was March 5th, 2024, 2 years to the day since that engagement party at the Grand Riverside Hotel. 2 years since I stood in front of 300 people and tore my daughter's life apart. "I need another chair," Dan called from the dining room. "5's enough," I said. "Marcus is bringing potatoes. Ashley said she'd be here by 6. Dan raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. He knew what tonight meant. The doorbell rang at 5:58 p.m. Marcus came in first, carrying a casserole dish of roasted potatoes. He was 25 now, broad-shouldered from 2 years of construction work, and he looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. "Hey, Dad." Marcus." He set the dish on the counter. "Foreman says I might make supervisor by summer. I've been thinking if I get the raise, I can bump the payments to $700 a month, $500 a month for 2 years. $12,000 toward the $500,000 Ashley gave him to stay quiet. He didn't have to do it. The DA never charged him, but he was doing it anyway. "That's good," I said. "Real good." Father Mike arrived next, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing his collar under a flannel jacket. He clapped me on the shoulder and headed straight for the living room, where he and Dan started arguing about the Bears' draft picks. At 6:07, headlights swept across the driveway. I opened the door before she could knock. Ashley stood on the porch, holding a bouquet of daisies, my favorite, and a bakery box. She looked older than 33. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No designer clothes, no jewelry. Just jeans, a sweater, and an expression I hadn't seen in years. Uncertainty. "Hi, Dad." "Ashley." She stepped inside, and I took the flowers. "I brought pie," she said, holding up the box. "Apple. From that place on 7th Street you used to take me when I was little," I remembered. Saturday mornings after my overnight shifts. Her in pigtails, me in my turnout pants, both of us covered in powdered sugar. "I remember," I said. "Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and too much silence." Marcus talked about the job site. Father Mike told a story about the church bake sale. Dan asked about my vegetable garden. Ashley sat across from me, cutting her chicken into tiny pieces and barely eating. Finally, I set down my fork. 2 years ago tonight, I said, I stood in front of 300 people and told them you forged our father's will, that you stole $3.3 million, that you lied, manipulated, and paid your brother to keep quiet. Ashley's fork clattered onto her plate. Marcus stiffened. Dan and Father Mike went still. "I'm not bringing it up to punish you," I continued. "I'm bringing it up because it happened, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "I know," she whispered. "You've spent 2 years trying to make it right," I said. "You finished your probation requirements. You work at a legal aid office helping people who can't afford lawyers. You sold your penthouse and gave me back almost everything you took. Marcus has been paying me back $500 a month even though he didn't have to." Marcus nodded, once his jaw tight. "Yeah, you've both worked hard," I said. "And I see it, I do." Ashley wiped her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Dad. I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Every single day I'm trying to be the person Grandpa thought I could be." I looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who used to sit on my lap and beg me to read her one more story. The teenager who rolled her eyes when I told her to be careful. The woman who stood in a courtroom and pled guilty to fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. And the woman sitting in front of me now, 2 years into a 5-year probation sentence, trying to rebuild a life she'd burned to the ground. "You want to know what your grandfather left me?" I asked. Ashley nodded. $3.3 million. 95% of his estate. This house. A trust fund. And a watch worth $25,000. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the watch, the one Samuel had returned to me a year ago. I set it on the table between us. "That's a lot of money," Marcus said quietly. "It is," I agreed. "But that's not what he left me." I looked around the table, at Dan, who'd stood beside me through 30 years of fires and family crises, at Father Mike, who'd spent hours counseling all 3 of us, at Marcus, who was learning what it meant to take responsibility, at Ashley, who was learning what it cost. "So my father left me a lesson," I said. "He left me integrity. He left me the knowledge that a man's legacy isn't what he leaves behind in a bank account. It's who he leaves behind and whether they're better for having known him." Ashley's shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands. "I spent 2 years being angry," I said. "Angry at you for lying. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Angry at Dad for dying and leaving me to deal with all of this." I picked up the watch and turned it over. The engraving on the back read, "To Clifford, 30 years of service. Riverside Fire Department." "But anger doesn't build anything," I said. "It just burns." I looked at Ashley. "So here's what I'm offering. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a chance. You keep doing what you're doing. You keep showing up. You keep helping people. And maybe in a few more years we'll get back to something that looks like family." Ashley nodded, tears streaming down her face. Okay. But if you ever lie to me again," I said, and my voice went cold. "We're done. You understand?" "I understand." Father Mike cleared his throat. "I think that calls for pie." We laughed shaky, uncertain laughter, but it was something. After dinner, Ashley reached into her bag and pulled out a wooden box. She set it on the table in front of me. "I made you something," she said. I opened it. Inside was a handmade chess set. The pieces were carved from dark walnut and pale maple, each one sanded smooth and polished until they gleamed. It took me 6 months," Ashley said. "I've been taking woodworking classes at the community center. I thought maybe we could play sometime, like we used to." I picked up the white king. It was solid, real, made with patience and time. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. "I'd like that." When I think about everything that happened, I realize that family betrayal isn't just about stolen money or forged documents. It's about broken trust, the kind that takes years to rebuild if it ever comes back at all. Grandpa stories like mine aren't rare. Every family has secrets. Every inheritance brings out sides of people you never knew existed. My father used to say, "God gives us free will, Gerald." That means we can choose mercy or we can choose vengeance. But only one of those builds something worth leaving behind. I didn't understand that for a long time. When I discovered the family betrayal, the lies, the theft, the manipulation, I wanted justice. I wanted Ashley to pay. But justice without mercy is just revenge in a suit and tie. And revenge doesn't heal anything. So here's my advice. If you're facing family betrayal or wrestling with someone who hurt you, don't do what I almost did. Don't let anger make your decisions. Don't let pride keep you from offering a second chance if they're willing to earn it. Ashley spent 2 years proving she wanted to change. Marcus did the same. Grandpa stories teach us that legacy isn't about what's in the will. It's about what you do with the time you're given and the people you choose to forgive. My father left me millions, but the real inheritance was the lesson character matters more than cash, and forgiveness is harder and more valuable than justice. That's what I've come to believe. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment. Share this with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more grandpa stories about life, legacy, and families that survive the unthinkable. Thanks for sticking with me to the end. These stories contain fictionalized elements created for reflection and learning. If that's not for you, feel free to explore other content. Take care.